thank you all for joining. As Eric said, I'm on the faculty at MIT Sloan, and I've been partnering with Alan Harris and the people that you'll hear about from Bayer for several years on what we're about to talk about today, creating digital intrapreneurs inside a big company. This is part of an ongoing series of webinars that we do, and today we're going to take a deep dive in how to build capability in an organization. And so why do we do these sessions is partly to share what we've learned about trying to make a difference in organizations, trying to make a difference in the world. And so this is just such a pleasure today to be joined by a group of people that have built up a capability to do digital AI, machine learning, data science inside an organization. I find it a super interesting story. I'm glad to have played a part in it. I'm joined by my counterpart at Bayer, Alan Harris. I'll have him introduce his team in just a moment. Eric, if you could advance to the next slide, just so people can see our faces a little bit in still mode, maybe. That would be great. Thanks. Okay, Alan, over to you. Do you want to say something about yourself and your team?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, hello, and up front, I want to thank you, Cord, and the MIT team. This is a true privilege on behalf of me and the Bayer team. We're very excited to be here today and share our modest insights from our journey. We know a lot of organizations are trying to decipher digital transformation, and I think the more we share, the more we can learn and enrich each other. I am Alan Harris. I am a program co-lead together with my colleague Timo Wernicke. We co-created, designed, and led this program. And with me here today, Court, are a group of amazing people that are representing our 100 alumni and 25 executive sponsors. So this small team here on this call is representing a very broad community of our program. So I want to say first and foremost, hello to Dr. Mike Devoy, who is the Chief Medical Officer of Bayer. He's head of the Pharmaceutical Medical Affairs and Pharmacovigilance Organization. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Alan, and just to be great to be here and amazing to see the diversity of countries and places around the world, and colleagues are joining us. So great to be here and looking forward.
Thank you, Mike. And Mike, we are very excited to have you here today because you were the one of the executive sponsors of this program when it was still scribbled on a piece of paper as a concept, and you've been endorsing and supporting this program all through its life cycle. So your perspective is really unique. And today we also have here participants from our different cohorts. I'm going to say hello to Stephanie Kamarath, who participated in our first cohort in 2017. Stephanie is the Chief of Staff of the Medical Affairs and Pharmacovigilance Organization. And Stephanie was a participant in the first cohort. So in that sense, thank you, Stephanie, for being willing to be quote unquote a guinea pig in this giant experiment when we just began, didn't really know what we were doing. And it's thanks to your feedback and insights that we were able to create an even better cohort for people like Svante Benken, who's here representing crop science. Svante is head of target biology in crop science. She was a participant in our second cohort, 2018, and returned in 2019 to coach one of the newbies teams. So Svante, we're going to learn from you today about what it was like to be a participant, but then return as a coach. Thank you for being with us here today. And last but not least, our colleague Fedra Stavropoulou, a data expert from Pharma Clinical Data Science and Analytics. And Fedra, as a data expert, was embedded in cohort number 3 into our consumer health team. And so already, I hope our audience is getting a bit of a sense that we at Bayer, we're focused on different areas, or we have basically different businesses, each trying to solve very big, serious problems. We have a pharmaceutical division, crop protection, crop science division, and consumer health division. And the people on the call here today will be able to also represent that diversity. So that's all, Court, from my end, and back to you.
Yeah, I just want to talk let's go to the next slide, Eric, that shows how we're going to do this, sort of the flow, so people know where we are in the conversation and can see when certain questions might be answered. So here's the agenda for today. We've done number 1 here. in a moment, I'm going to turn it back to Alon and to Mike to talk about the purpose behind the program from Bayer's perspective. Why do this in the first place? And then they'll talk a little bit about the audience. We'll show you the solution that took place over several months. And at that point, we're going to get more involved with the people who actually were part of the cohort or coaches or data scientists. So we'll hear from some of the people that Alon was just introducing. And we'll talk at some point about the learning, later on about the learning content, the types of projects that people were involved with. I think that'll come up pretty organically. And then we want to finish by talking about the supporting infrastructure. What was put in place to help these particular students, executives go through this process and yield the projects that they ended up yielding. I think Alon will tell us, but I think there's a high percentage of them that continue even today, several years later. So I'll let him talk about exactly what the numbers are there. So this is how the flow is going to go. And again, feel free to put the questions into the chat at any moment. I'm going to open that in just a moment and start looking at it. And I have some folks from MIT who are going to also help me look at it. So we'll try to get some of those things in. But let's start just by grounding all of us. And why do this in the first place? What are you hoping to accomplish? That kind of thing. So back to you, Alon, for some conversation about number 2 there.
Excellent. So what we're going to try and describe is the why behind this program that we're going to dive into. And Mike, perhaps you could bring us into the kind of executive perspective of why a corporate like Bayer and an organization like R&D in our company wanted this kind of framework to be designed and established. What was the gap you were hoping to close, and what were the benefits you were hoping to get? So Mike, some perspective from your angle.
Thanks a lot. And this goes back to early 2017 and the discussion within the executive leadership of our cross-divisional R&D organization, where we reflected that we saw digital innovation as a critical factor as we move forward across our different divisions. We'd had some very good experience bringing external entrepreneurs into our organization in various programs. We had to bring companies in the startup phase where we mentored them, we gave sometimes investments, we helped support them, and that certainly was successful in bringing different culture and an entrepreneurial concept within the company. But we reflected we were a 16,000 wide R&D organization across our 3 businesses, as you said, pharmaceuticals, crop science, and consumer health. And we had all these great expertise in different scientific areas, technological domains, across cultures, across geographies. And we thought, is there a way we can really create this energy around digital and data within our organization? So we came up with this concept with your help, as you mentioned, and your colleagues, of creating our own digital intrapreneurs. Really, how could we bring that self-motivated R&D professionals together with life science and data science, and how could we take that initiative forward? So that's really what brought us to this program. How do we bring people who are highly skilled technically together with all our in-house data science and technical experts, and do something about creating a spirit of entrepreneurship within the company? And when we looked at that, there wasn't, if you like, something we could just, a training program we could go and buy off the shelf. So that's really what brought us to create what we call this R&D tech immersion program that we're talking about today, and has continued on since those discussions in early 2017.
Well, thanks, Mike, for taking us back in time to the beginning of this exciting journey. It reminds me that at the beginning, when we understood that there's no kind of blueprint, we were going to have to design this for ourselves. It reminds me of a lot of conversations we had internally where we kind of went and interviewed stakeholders, data science experts, experts in different areas in our R&D organization. And we asked them a lot of questions to understand the existing kind of maturity that we had in relation to data science. And I'm going to maybe mention a few gaps that we understood we're going to need to address in this program. And I'm inviting the audience here listening to our conversation. If this is a gap that you two have kind of tried to figure out how to address, maybe kind of comment in the chat saying something like, yes, this sounds familiar, or something of the sort. So I think, of course, when we're dealing with an organization as diverse as Bayer's R&D, we understood that there's a lack in fluency in the core concepts and the core ideas behind data science. And if you can't speak the lingo, it's very hard to bridge between experts. And so that was a gap that we understood we had to address. People kind of were using terms like machine learning and deep learning and NLP and AI very interchangeably, not necessarily knowing what the substance is behind those names and those concepts. But also there were a lot of misconceptions relating to what these technologies and these capabilities can actually deliver versus what we sometimes see in the media, or sometimes see in the news, or sometimes see in public relations activities of other companies. And I think what we sensed was that there was a lack in a real grounding, a realistic understanding of the potential, but also the current limitations of what these capabilities can do. But one of the other gaps that we were really kind of very early seeing is that a lot of projects, a lot of initiatives, a lot of grassroots movement got derailed or got stuck because people were so focused on the data that they forgot that at the end of all of these ideas is a person who needs to make a decision based on an insight that was generated by a machine. And if we miss the human, or if we don't address that up front, we're just going to bump into some hurdles later on and see that people may resist or miscomprehend, or maybe we're putting all our effort and energy and creativity in areas that are not valuable to our users. And so user centricity is one of the hardest things to do, I think, when you're working in this area, because it's so exciting what you could do with data. But the question is, should you be doing it, and will someone actually embrace that? And last but not least, we sensed that when we bring people of diverse backgrounds together, and I think, you know, in any innovation project that's true, and that's extremely true for data science, it's not enough to just put people in a room and expect them to be able to speak each other's language. There needs to be some sort of a framework or common toolbox or common baseline to enable people from different backgrounds to communicate, to brainstorm, to make decisions and navigate this turbulent arena called data science. So these are some of the gaps that we were trying to address. And maybe, you know, humbly, we try to do this, you know, and solve for this in the program. But I really want to highlight one principle that we'll be discussing here today, and that's the principle of co-creation. Whatever we did as a community. Everything you're going to see today and everything we're going to discuss, we co-created with each other, with the members in our organization. And I think that gave us kind of always a sense of being connected to the realities on the ground and not in an ivory tower. So Court, back to you. At least I think Mike and I have kind of started to address the why. Any other things you might want to ask, we're happy to answer.
Yeah, I thought maybe two other things would be helpful, Alon, and then I'm hoping to hear from some of the people who are live on the ground in the middle of all this. If you could say a couple of things about how you picked the early participants in this. Yes, it's diverse, but you went for a certain level and a certain attitude or outlook. So if you could talk about that, and then also the range of projects, and then that would be useful. So what kind of data science project, what kinds of data, that would be helpful for, I think, people on the call here to know.
Great, then I'll try and address the first question relating to the types of people we were looking for. And maybe Mike, while I'm answering this, maybe some perspective from your end of what kind of challenges were important for you to send into our framework, because these challenges were defined by our executive leaders. So Court, we're a very big organization, 16,000 people. We understood very early on, we're not going to be able to take 16,000 people on this journey, but we were thinking, how could we create a cohort, a group, a community of intrapreneurs that would be role models for everyone else, that would be influential beyond the program, that would take the knowledge and skills and transfer them to their immediate teams and into their networks. We didn't want the value of this program to be locked in only to the people who were benefiting from it as trainees. We wanted to find the people who were going to grow in our organization and become central to the way we work and the way we think. So we selected leaders, people who've had project management experience, people who have seen how hard it is to take an idea to execution, but also we brought in diverse technical experts so that we knew that each of the teams that we had in the program were self-sufficient. We needed a data scientist in each team. We needed people that were subject matters in each team, but we also kept purposely a certain portion of the participants totally removed from digital or totally removed from the topics that they were dealing with, because we didn't want to get into groupthink and biases. We wanted that diversity to also create some creative abrasion, which is a term you taught us. So our vision was that these young leaders and kind of early stage up and coming talents would then, after the program, grow to become formal managers of teams and portfolios, but most of all in their personalities, open to learning, curious, rolling up their sleeves and courageous enough to try out something, for many of them for the first time, and seeing themselves as ambassadors of this agenda so that they could spread the word with others in the organization. That's how we get the footprint. Yeah, and as for how the challenges were chosen, maybe Mike, what was important for you, maybe as from your perspective as a challenge sponsor, thinking of what kind of challenges would be suitable to address in a program like ours?
So for us, really, it was important that we had practical, real life business problems, that this was not just a theoretical exercise that generated a nice project profile, nice publication, but really these are the things coming out of the business, real life practical topics where there was a belief we could solve them or make things work better by using data science at scale in this way. So each of the team's members would discuss with their management, their organizations, now what are some of the problems you're struggling with at the moment? Where could we maybe apply data to solve this problem? Then the teams would discuss and debate, and they probably have 3 or 4 different ideas, and then they would sort of agree on what was the one they wanted to focus on in the program as a team. And then they would bring that back into the organization, and we might talk later about how we selected them. But I think the critical thing was, and that really is part of the overall concept that I hope you're getting behind this, was they had to be real topics that Bayer in R&D was struggling or facing, and where we believed that we could take a big step forward if we could apply data science to those topics. So it was again linking the participants, their knowledge, experience, and the expectations of the organization, and something where we hoped, if successful, this would then carry on far beyond the program and bring benefit to the organization.
Alon, maybe I'm thinking, or Mike, either one of you, part of what I thought was interesting is that when we're talking about the impact of these projects, some of them were devoted to greater efficiency in the R&D world, greater productivity. Yeah. Others had a strategic driver behind them to understand other uses of drugs. Others were using different kinds of data, images, sound, not just numbers or words. So maybe, have I got it right by saying it's that range of projects, but all had this idea of somehow generating greater productivity and efficiency or insight?
I think exactly, Kurt. So we didn't, because I don't think we felt we should be defining exactly which area, which space we should be in, but rather we try to listen and understand what's going to be beneficial in the organization. Some were about efficiency, some about productivity, some about helping with our research programs, and some also potentially helping us develop new business areas. So we had that, again, that diversity came out of the diversity of different individuals and disciplines and backgrounds we brought together. And what was fascinating for me, as a sponsor whose main background is in pharmaceuticals and human health, was seeing how these approaches could be brought to one of the early programs you might remember was about tomato crops and what you could do applying theirs. So it's just there was the diversity of ideas, but always linked to really making some business impact.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think, Cord, for the audience out there that may not be familiar with kind of our arena or our industry, we're dealing with tremendous challenges in relation to health and to hunger. We have in our minds, we're thinking of doctors and patients suffering from diseases. We're thinking of farmers trying to secure, the yield of this season. We're thinking of consumers dealing with different maybe allergies or pains, and internally we're dealing with the immense challenge of bringing a solution to market, which can in many cases take years, requires tremendous effort, hundreds of people to collaborate, and we want to condense that timeline. We really want to make our ability to deliver innovation faster. So with the pressures of the outside world and the pressures of the inside world, the challenges we were addressing in this program were to unlock value in that context, not to be a little island of a little sandbox where we can just practice with some data and have some fun, but really the aspiration was that whatever we were working in this program would have the potential to translate into a real project meaning that it lives in the digital pipeline of the company beyond this training setting. So as the training had a start date and a finish date, our ideas certainly did not, and all the projects were kind of, the project teams were thinking of a 5-year roadmap and how we actually execute on this. And you mentioned this earlier. I'm really happy to say that about 70% of the topics that we were addressing in this training setting are alive and kicking today as core central digital projects at Bayer beyond those days that we were in the training setting.
Yeah. And just to make that tangible, because Alan expressed that very eloquently, the original concept is the teams would come back at the end of the program, pitch their ideas, and there was a small budget we'd set aside at a sort of corporate level to support the one or maybe the 2 best programs. But what happened is every program got funded because the R&D leaders there put their hands into their own budgets to say, we really want to keep this. We don't want to lose this particular program that's come out of crop science or out of pharmaceuticals. So every program got funded, but not because we had initially the money to do that, but because we saw, wow, this might really make a difference, and we don't want to lose it. So every program, I remember from that first wave, we all put our hands up and said, we'll find a way to solve it and find the budget, because we believe each of these is worth investing in.
Yeah. I'm tracking some of the questions that have come up in the Q&A and in the chat, and I'm hoping that we're addressing them as we go along here. We've covered the business purpose and the why. There was a question about, did you train middle and senior managers who would need to encourage and support the cohort? Some of that happened along the way. What was remarkable to me about this is that there was a lot of senior management support for this already. And Mike just talked about the willingness to budget ongoing work as the projects increased in scope and scale, or looked for new ways to solve a similar problem. So some of that we were answering, I believe. There was a question here about measurement. And I don't know if there's anything to say beyond the projects continued and got bigger, and we began to have them flow out into the wider Bayer. Are there any other metrics that Alain and Mike, you could talk about? And then I want to show the slide about what the solution looked like and hear from the participants.
At least from my end, there's a set of metrics, and they each address something different. You need a set of metrics for the actual program. Are people acquiring new knowledge and skills? Is their mindset changing? Are the skills and knowledge that they're acquiring replicable beyond the program? Will the knowledge that they acquired get transferred to others? Okay, so these are some of the things we measured during the program, but also months after the program by surveys and speaking with the participants and seeing, what was their ripple effect outside of the program. each challenge that we hosted, and we had 20 of them over the period of the program running, had its own metrics because it was linked to a business challenge. So if we're in the area of efficiency and productivities, how many hours or days have we knocked out of a process, or weeks or months if you can? How much error have we diminished? How much waste have we minimized? And if we're discussing revenue potential and new business models, of course, that's another metric altogether. But beyond that, I want to highlight something that is sometimes softer, and that is the cultural impact and how much we were able to kind of infuse into the organization new ways of working, new paradigms relating to agility and de-risking these types of projects. And so those are also elements that we looked into. But you know what my favorite metric is, Court? My favorite metric is which of these participants went on and kind of in their development track became more curious about this topic and chose to maybe expand their education even further. And which of these participants eventually landed in roles that enabled them formally to drive more innovation and more data science types of projects. And we've got all the numbers, but I'm not going to bore you, but we're seeing that is one of the best returns on investment, because as these people grow and as they grow in skill and in their roles and in their degrees of influence, that's really where you start to see the fruits. So you need to have some patience for these types of initiatives, not judge them just with short-term metrics, but really take the time to look 2, 3, 4, even 5 years beyond and see that those cohorts are today basically our digital leadership in R&D.
Yeah. Thanks. There was a question here. Can we hear from some of the female executives who are in here, and how is diversity handled? And we're going to get to that right now.
Of course, we're going to get to that. Of course.
We're super eager to do that. Here's what I want to do first, though, just for a moment. If we could advance to the next slide, I want to give anybody who's listening a sense of what did the solution look like? What was the overall structure of it? Thanks, Eric. And Alan, if you could talk about this just briefly, and then I'm hoping to hear, I think it's Stephanie, that you were part of the first cohort, if I'm remembering that right. If you could talk a little bit about your experience doing all this.
I'm going to try and hit two birds with one stone. So I'm going to give an overview of the program structure, but I'm going to ask Stephanie and Fedra and Svante to reflect on the moments that were most impactful to them along this journey. Okay, so so we address both. So this journey was spread over a series of months. And during this period, people went through 3 major stages. In the first stage, we purposely did not brainstorm. We took the time to understand the challenge, the problem. It's difficult to do. It's difficult to resist the temptation, because what people love doing is going to the data and start brainstorming 1,000 different ways that you could apply this with machine learning and computational vision and et cetera, et cetera. But we didn't want to do that. We wanted to stay in the problem domain before transitioning into the ideation phase, just to de-risk that we're misunderstanding the problem. In the brainstorming or explore phase, people were able to ideate, but then take the ideas into prototyping. And this meant that each team ran a hackathon for at least 3 to 4 days, with the data scientists helping us code, create mock-ups, generate some outputs, and give us a realistic understanding of, are our assumptions true or invalid, and only then pitch. So this is kind of, you see the curvy wave here, it's kind of time, but also the amount of input or information you have to digest as that time goes by. And you're kind of alternating between a divergent mindset, taking a lot in, versus a convergent mindset, which is saying, where are we going to focus? Where are we going to put our efforts? How do we make sure that with the precious time we have, we're focusing on the most important issues? And the other comment I want to highlight here is we did not deploy the knowledge and skills and the training all up front, but we actually deployed it in pulses, so that the knowledge and skills that you needed for phase 1 were provided in that phase, but only the knowledge and skills that were provided for that phase were there. Next, when you moved into the next stage, you got another package. What this made possible is that the information and the learnings were fresh in people's minds, and they could immediately apply them, or else you just create a huge gap. But let me ask Stephanie first, and then Svante and Fedra. Reflecting on your journeys, what was impactful for you? What was meaningful for you? What did you take away from that beyond the program? Stephanie, please.
So yeah, thank you for the question. So I took away a lot of different things, especially what was very helpful beside dealing with a business challenge that truly was an impact generator in what we do on a daily basis. We learned a lot on site. So one thing I took away was how to work agile and how to set up a team and how to make sure projects are run more efficiency in line with Scrum methodology. I took a lot of this back for future projects. And I do not work on classical IT projects, I must say, but there are lots of elements you can actually steal or pick and use for other sort of meetings or projects or whatever you run. And I see this more frequently throughout our company now, where in the past, you know, all of these terms could more be found on the IT side of things. We have fully implemented this into our business now. Doing dailies has become so normal, doing retrospectives, doing sprints. So this is one of the things I took away.
Stephanie, what was it like for you going through the process of actually prototyping? You know, sitting with the data scientist and actually creating something based on the data that you had available at that time?
It was actually tough in the beginning because I think we as a team were not used to getting feedback so immediately. You would always send your data somewhere and then weeks later someone would come back with something, but we could see on the spot what is possible with your data, or even worse, what is not possible because of poor data quality. But the immediate feedback, that always helped, and we could experiment. I know it sounds weird, but we were able to fail fast, which actually saved time at the end of the day. And we immediately knew what worked and what doesn't work. And then constantly getting the input from the stakeholders and feedback on what is needed, what is not needed, that was always very helpful.
Thank you, Stephanie. Svante, your team from crop science went through the same journey in a different cohort. What were some of the memorable elements here for you?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So definitely being in early research, I think for me it was a definite eye-opener, and something that I still use a lot is to think about the farmer, because when you're so early research, you tend to deep dive into the scientific problem, and really having the picture of the farmer there and really giving him names and think about what children they have and what hobbies and stuff. And this from the beginning, and having that in mind really helped me as a scientist to really think about the end product and not just about the scientific problem ahead. The other thing that I also would like to echo from the hackathon was for me fun learning to really walk in the shoe of a data scientist, because I'm a biochemist and I had applied some data science and, like Stephanie said, sent away some data packages, but really walking the shoe and seeing the programming problems and understanding the challenges, I think that helps me also now a lot to really help translate between the wet lab and the production of the data, if you want, and making it something useful for later, and trying to bring in the data scientists as early as possible to have that that discussion and collaboration to make sure that what we produce in the wet lab is more valuable and can actually be used to create additional value. So that was for me a definite big one. And if you ask me about tools, it's the value stairway, because we tend to say, like, you have to have a vision as a young leader, but really thinking with the team step by step, talking to the stakeholders about what is the value propositions in between to get to the final stage and the final vision. That was also a very important eye-opener for me that I use a lot now.
Thank you, Svante. Svante, I think you mentioned two tools that we use. The first was building personas of our users. You highlighted kind of humanizing and empathizing with the person at the end that is going to benefit from this, and really trying to have that person within our imagination, have a seat at the table at every point of the journey as we take the different decisions. And the second tool you mentioned was the value stairway. Kurt, could we show the next slide just to, because I think
people know what we're talking about. The value of this, I think, is that very often people think of these data science projects and they shoot for the ideal and they ask for budget to achieve the ideal. And this is a way of saying, let's break it down into smaller components. I'm not doing it justice, Alan. Maybe what else would you add about the value stairway?
No, I think so. What we learned very early is that people, on the one hand, need a big dream. Okay, autonomous cars. You know, that's like a big, lofty dream, because that's where the inspiration gets grabs you. That's where you're able to also captivate others in the organization. We always know, you know, you always need a network to bring ideas to life. However, you need to clearly have a starting point, and you don't have the prerogative of unlocking the value in 5 years' time. You have to start unlocking value much sooner, so that people have trust in your solution, that people see that you're actually on their users' side and not just waiting for a long time and then getting delusioned. So the value stairway is a way to park your ideas and stretch your ideas. In many cases, you're having conversations with your colleagues, but you are thinking very short-term and immediate low-hanging fruit, and your colleague is thinking 5 years away in moonshot. And the question is, we need both of your ideas, but how can we bridge them? What would be the next step 2, 3, and 4 to connect between the extremes? Sometimes all the ideas are in step 3, and we need to somehow give them a facelift and stretch them further away, beyond even maybe the capacities that we have in the company, or beyond even the abilities of technologies today. Because as we know, the conversation we're having now in February 2022, if we look at the technology that we can use today, within a year, most of it's going to jump tremendously and advance. So let's not just assume that what we have today to play with is what we'll have in a few years' time. So, Court, this is a framework that helps moderate. It helps create kind of a campfire. When people are throwing ideas in different directions, it helps us create a structure, and we play on different dimensions: cost, duration, the level of impact, the functionality of the solution, the number of users or the type of users, even the type of analytics. And I think a classic case in what we saw in Tech Immersion is that actually in many cases, your beginning has to be modest. It's going to be more about visualization of the data, navigating the data more efficiently. That's an easy step 1. It's not easy, but it's a place to begin with. And all the lofty predictive modeling, et cetera, might come a bit later, but we have to go back to the users and say, we heard what you said about the problem. Here's a first step along the way. And maybe I'm curious what our audience thinks about this, but I think in many cases, especially in large organizations, we don't kill projects when it's time to say goodbye. And we tend to start a lot of projects, but we don't say goodbye to them. So with this structure, if we've arrived at step 2, and we see that we're not delivering on the value, or that the environment has changed and we're no longer relevant, we just don't go up to step 3, and that's perfectly fine. That's not a failure. That's just kind of halting at that point. And so there's other considerations here of making sure we don't waste our resources, and that we continuously test assumptions and use this structure, this framework, to kind of moderate. This is the North Star, so that everybody has exactly the same understanding of where we are and where we're heading. Fedra.
Let's go back one slide.
Yes.
And then have Fedra talk. Eric, can you go
Yes.
back one slide? And yes, we're killing the zombie projects. I'd love
Exactly.
that.
Or as they say, a lot of projects are dead, they just don't know it yet.
Yes.
Fedra, as a data scientist, what was it like for you conducting 15, 20 interviews before touching data, before coding, before anything? What was that understand phase like for you?
Thank you, Alon, for the question. So actually, also my favorite part was when I was reflecting when Stephanie and Swante were speaking, was actually the empathize part. So the first part, I think in the program, we really understood also us working the technical solution, how important is the human factor in building technical solutions. So understanding the users, understanding your colleagues, which might be impacted by the solution you are building, or by other functions that might be needed in order to get to your step 5 or your value stairway. So they have to be all onboarded, and we have to understand what they need and what they know and what risks they see for the future that we have to take into account in what we are building. And of course, as Swante mentioned, so keeping in mind the patient or the customer or the consumer, in our case, in consumer health, is very important to bring value to the product we are building. So maybe talking to data scientists now that I know we are allowed being on the background in the door with the data and not communicating with anyone, sometimes it's also interesting to get into discussions with colleagues from other functions to understand their perspective, and then your model or your algorithm will become also better and more useful, and it's more highly probably you will see it also somewhere in the market.
Thank you, Fedra. Court, is it okay if we spend some more time on questions to our colleagues here? Because I think
Yes.
their perspectives on the journey are fantastic.
Yes.
So Svante, we did something really interesting with your support, and that is we offered you the chance to come back as a coach to the following cohort. In a sense, to bring all your wisdom to a fresh team. What was that experience like coming back again as a coach versus being a participant?
So it was really fun, first of all, because it was a very motivated and fun team. And I think as a leader, it's always fun to see that when you have the chance to work with such a group of people. But really, I think as a coach and a coaching mindset, and what I see what is also growing within Bayer is the dominant way of leading, luckily, and hierarchical top-down decisions are getting less and less there. It was really about not just bringing all my knowledge, but to step back and help them stay on the path. And having gone to the program just a year before, I knew, of course, the pitfalls, like after the interviews being confused and not knowing what to focus on now, or using some of the tools just not in the best ways, and really being able to help them on track, but not stepping in, but letting them have their experiences was, as a leader, it was really fun to see that happening and hopefully helping them. And I would say it was also good that the project was not directly in my field of expertise. So that helped, of course, in the learning process, because it reduced just the chance of me stepping in, because I wasn't, I didn't have the expertise even to do that. I had to step back there because I knew the tools already, of course, but it was really good to see them grow. And also, I think it gave the program the chance to multiply, because at least I think we were able to run more teams, because when you have the coaches and of course also the master coach in the background to help, you could just reach more people. And I think for me, the main outcome of the program is really this multiplying and being able to reach more than just 100 people, and being able to really bring this as a style into the organization. And there, I think having that, being part of that was also really rewarding.
Thank you, Svante. We were very lucky to have you together with some of the other alumni come back as coaches. Yeah, it enabled us operationally to double the number of participants going through the program, but also to enable the participants to get exposed to diversity of perspectives and experiences like yours and the other coaches. Stephanie, there's a little tiny point here in the green zone called pitch. And I think it's oversimplified here. What was it like for you and the team to prepare a pitch to kind of advocate for your concept and idea and ask for real money? What was that journey like, that last milestone of this program?
Looking back, I have to say that was much more intense than I would have ever anticipated, because we have tons of meetings, we run slide after slide after slide, but really focusing on 5 to 10 minutes getting the message across is not as easy as you would expect it to be. At the end of the day, 10 minutes is not long. On the other end, they say if you can't pitch it in 90 seconds, you won't be able to pitch it in 90 minutes. So we really had to make sure the value of what we are doing or plan to do is coming across without providing too many details, because obviously on an executive level, you're not so much interested in how you get there, which data science techniques you apply. It's really about the outcome and how it makes a difference to the organization. But the most challenging part was focus, focus, focus.
Thank you. Court, we must talk about the very, very valuable collaboration we had here with Sloan, where we came with our participants for a week-long program with you, and maybe some perspective from your end about the logic of that experience that you were hoping to create, and what was your perception of us coming in through the door, clearly not executives coming into an executive suite for an executive education.
Yeah. I'm happy to do that, Alan. There was a question just now, but someone wanted a reminder about how long this process was. You can see it at the top of this slide. It's a 6-month journey, and MIT showed up near the end. And it was a total of 100 people, 3 different cohorts. So I'm hoping that answers the question that was in the chat. What's interesting about this is that from MIT's perspective, we were seeing people, especially in the first cohort, so this is Stephanie's cohort, come to us at the end of a long and arduous journey down a foggy road. And they arrived here, they had lots of good ideas, and the theory behind what we were going to do was say, look, it's not only about data science and coding and the technologies that you have in R&D, but it's also, there's a management challenge, and you are a leader and are going to need to make change happen around your project. So that drove all of the content that Alan and I co-created for that week. Was anything that would help the participants be change leaders would be an important thing to get across to them. What was surprising about it, this is your question just now, Alan, was no one had addressed the participants as a leader before. I was a little surprised by that. I don't know if you're nodding your head or not, Swantje, Stephanie, and Phaedra, but I mean, it was like, wow, you've never been called a leader before? You should have been. And so that was striking. The interesting thing too, was to notice people who did come back as coaches, they had somehow been transformed as business people, not only as data scientists, but because they'd been through this 6-month process and then pitched and then very often taken their project forward to a larger scale or a different use case, they really did come back as leaders, as business people, knowledge about this whole, their knowledge and comfort in what just has to be an ambiguous activity. Their comfort with that was just remarkable to me. So I'm hoping that answers a lot of your question, Alan.
It certainly does. It certainly does. And I'm curious from the participants' perspective, Phaedra, what was kind of striking for you in the executive education experience you got at MIT?
Thank you, Alan. So we spent 1 week at the MIT. It was very intense. We had to work at the same time on our pitch, as Stephanie described, but also we had to attend lectures around innovation, digital transformation, strategy, cultural change. So if I had to pick up one presentation from the MIT Executive Program that still have in my mind was the presentation around dynamic work design. So it was a presentation by Sheila Dodge from the Broad Institute, bringing us into the Broad Institute and explaining to us how they managed to bring innovation in the processes in order then to free up time to do innovation in other areas in the Broad Institute. So there was not a digital solution that they had created at the end that was also very interesting. You don't always need a new app or a new technical solution. It was just a room where everybody could join a discussion, say what the problem is, what are the next steps, where they need help. So that was very interesting to see how an organization can work in a completely different setting than I've seen some other cases.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mike, maybe a question to you, looking at how people experience this executive education, and this is really not the normal standard, right, audience to bring to this type of program. What did you notice in the behaviors, the mindsets of people after they'd gone through this portion of the journey?
And it was, I think, it's interesting to hear what Kurt said, because he also had the privilege of seeing some people come back after they've been through the program as coaches. And I think I would really reflect that back, knowing many of the people who came particularly from my organization. But I think and understanding that we're all leaders now in our own situation, we can all apply those techniques. And I think, as Swantje said, our organizations, we're trying really hard to become less hierarchical, less control driven, and more entrepreneurial within our organizations in our daily work. So, and just last week we had a meeting, and one of the alumni, not here today, I don't know how it even came up, but she said this was the best educational experience she'd had, because she took away that confidence of learning, and she's now a manager in a different part of the organization at a more senior level. But I think it was just and the intensity. So I think we heard about that just now from Petra, it was the intensity and the experience and everything happening. Really, I think people really grew from that in that period of time. So, and that's why I, really was a strong advocate for this program as we took it forward, having seen people grow out of that first cohort.
Thank you, Mike. Kurt, back to you.
There was a question just now in the chat about what percentage of your time was devoted to this. And so I thought that we might just get.
That is such it's a relevant question. So
okay. Let's go to that one.
We can, it's funny, it's a question around numbers. We can play with them in different ways. We can say 25 days over 6 months, or we can say an average of 3 to 4 or 5 hours a week. And that is a big investment. But what we try to do is not to, on the one hand, suffocate people and overload them, because everybody here was doing this above and on top of their jobs, but to create some intensity. I don't think you can go through an immersive learning experience without there being some intensity. And so we were constantly balancing this. And I think the fact that people were working in teams versus individually enabled that flexibility. So if some people had were super busy, the others could compensate for them. And that's also kind of a skill here. But that's overall about 25 days, all included, all the activities, the weekly meetings, the training seminars. We even had a 3-day radio show. Do you remember that, guys? Where we had from morning to night broadcasting like a real radio show, where every hour there was a different project from our company presenting the problem they're trying to solve and how they're doing it with data science. We just wanted to celebrate this kind of mosaic of different challenges we're facing and get inspiration from other fellow enthusiasts in our organization. So yeah, that's the numbers that I can share.
One other question I had, and this is for the whole group. I originally thought I was going to ask just Mike, but I am betting that Stephanie Svantje and Phaedra, what do you wish more senior management understood about how to support this in a useful way? There's some questions that have been in the chat that are subtly about it. Senior management really bought in? Are they, sort of pretending to play the game, but not really in the game with you? Anything that you wish senior managers would do or say more of or less of? Anybody can come in here. Stephanie, I just saw you unmute yourself. You have it sounds like, am I writing a check on your checking account by asking you to speak about that?
Yeah, I was just getting myself prepared. So
okay.
I think where senior managers can truly support, and at least I can say I've seen that in our organization, is really encourage the people to participate and then empower them and then step back a little bit, because you know what your job is going to be and it should be up to you how to get there. And then obviously the managers should keep an open door mentality where you can go in case you have questions or feedback. And I can say, at least from my side, this was truly given throughout the program and afterwards. And even though we never thought it was about to happen, we actually got granted the money, and there we were, senior management empowering us, giving us the money. So we were in a situation where we were very surprised that we would actually continue, but felt very lucky that we were able to do so. So that really was a big encouragement and empowerment we got. And I believe that's key for such projects.
Thanks, Stephanie. Maybe Phaedra or Svantje.
Yeah, maybe just to add on that. I think we also saw that the senior manager and our stakeholder engagement saw that we were really addressing the problem in a different way using data science, and they learned a lot from that. And I hope that they will take that up, and now really seeing when they're shaping organizations to help us to integrate the data science into the teams and really making it more like of a must-have. As I mentioned before, to have them early in the discussion and really part of the projects, and not those people you throw the data over the fence,
yes.
Now model something, to really live that culture and also provide the organization that kind of fosters this kind of interaction. And we see that happening in Bayer.
Good. My impression is that so often it's just a set of projects, but there's no structure built in around them. Very often process changes needed, other things around the organization need to change in order to make these things keep going forward, get bigger, have more impact. And that very often is misunderstood or not understood as deeply as it needs to be. But would you agree, Alan? I see you nodding your head.
Yeah. I remember when we vetted the challenges coming into the program, the question I would ask is there a person that is willing to support the team as they go through the program, but assuming they would be granted a budget at the end, take it into implementation? If we didn't have the sponsor, and this was just a challenge that is being like a hot potato passed between departments, it wouldn't come into the program. So we really needed the sponsors to be extremely invested in guiding and providing strategic context to the teams. But then when the program ended, take the ideas, take the prototypes and form real projects. And that, I think, has been the bridge between a training environment into real life, without which this is just a sandbox.
Yeah, cool. I think we're right up against the time, at least according to my phone here. Any last comments from anybody? I think we've answered most of the questions in the chat. Let's see here. I love the comment about taking this from a learning or a training environment into real life, Alan, which is part of why we wanted to do something about our work with you and Bayer, because it's all about impact at the end of the day. And that's why I'm so proud to have been involved with this.
We're lucky to have you and MIT in this project, Court, because at the end of the day, we get used to the culture and the climate we work in every single day. But when we step outside and come to an international institute like yourselves and get exposed to these thought leaders, your staff, you yourself, and your perspective, that you work with CEOs every day and other organizations on their digital transformation, it's a perspective you can only get there. It's very hard to get that at home. So extremely, extremely valuable.
Thank you. So let me just wrap by saying thank you for participating. As it says on the slide here, we hope this was useful to you. This will be posted. We recorded it and we'll post it later. I think it'll be at least on LinkedIn as far as I know. And I noticed there've been some questions in the chat. They were quite specific, and we'll try our best to answer those as best we can. So thank you for joining. Hope this was useful, and we're looking forward to talking with you about these kinds of things again. Alon and all the folks at Bayer, so great to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank
hopefully
you.
soon we'll
Bye.
have hopefully soon we meet again on site.
I hope so too.